My name is Leanne Rohr. I work with the Coshocton County Drug-Free Coalition, and we're from Coshocton County. So some of the tools we utilized as we were working through the SPF process to help us overcome some of the obstacles were our OSET evaluator. She was very helpful as we worked through roadblocks that we would have or issues there where we'd get confused or not really know what the next steps were. She was very helpful in working through those different questions. Always on call at a moment's notice whenever we would need her. Just send her an email or a phone call and she'd be right there. Also, our OCAM coach was very helpful in working with us on the different aspects, coming down, talking to the coalition about different pieces and parts of the SPF process, and really helping the community learn how to implement the SPF. We also found it very helpful to have the webinars recorded and on the website to be able to go back and look at those. Sometimes when you're on a webinar or you're in a meeting, there's just so much information it's hard to retain all of it. So being able to go back and look at those online and to review them and even watch them at a coalition meeting with the full group were very helpful in really learning the process. Our coalition really will probably utilize the entire SPF. I think that it's made in a way that it works well and it flows together from planning to implementation to evaluation, and then right back into the process of assessing and looking at capacity. It just flows so well together that I think we'll continue to use that model, and the fact that it's data driven and people really have learned that looking at the data makes a difference. When we first started the process, we thought we knew where we were going and really had a vision of, okay, we're looking at prescription drug misuse among youth, and here's what we're going to do. But as we started working through the process and listening to our community and looking at our data, we found that what we thought was the direction really wasn't what our community needed. So that part of it was really helpful. Our coalition will evaluate our strategies using a couple different methods. So we're going to use a formative evaluation method, which will look at the whens and wheres and whys and hows of how we implemented our media campaign. So it's really going to look at how many people did we reach through our media campaign, what was the total impact in the community through billboards, through advertising, through giveaways and such. And then we will also look at a summative evaluation. So we're also going to look back at the data. What's the data telling us? Our Oh Yes survey is something we really want to continue doing in our schools because we found that the data really tells us what's going on with our youth. And so when we look at the data and we look at the formative evaluation, that's going to help us know, was our campaign successful? Were there things we need to change? What would we do differently in the future? Pieces of the evaluation process that we'll take with us after this process ends is that we always need to go back and look at both the data and the impact of the work that we're doing. So it's not just one piece of it. There's many pieces to evaluation. It's not just about looking at data, and it's not just about looking at how many places and where did you put your media campaign and what kind of things are out there, but it's really about looking at the full picture so that you have a good idea of how you're impacting the community. Cultural competence was a big part of what we looked at as we were looking at the SPF process and the initiative that we were working on with the media campaign. As we were doing the planning and assessing pieces and doing the listening sessions, we wanted to make sure that we reached the community as a whole. So we reached out to all parts of our community. A lot of times when we do our work, we focus on Coshocton City, which is the one big city in our county, but we didn't want to do that. We wanted to reach out to the full community because it's a county-wide problem. And so we looked at the full county bringing in all demographics of folks. So we didn't want to just reach the upper end or the lower end of the economic structure. We wanted to reach every person. And interestingly enough, what we found was in both our adult and our youth focus group, we had two very distinct groups, with one group being people who really had no idea that there was an issue with prescription drug misuse. They were just more or less clueless that it was a problem. And then we had a second group in both the adults and the youth who were very entrenched in the problem of prescription drug misuse and really shared a lot about that. So it was a good mix of the culture of our community to see both ends of the spectrum. And then as we were working on our media campaign, our initial thought was to really bring in people from the community. People are going to want to be out there. They're going to want their faces on billboards and in the literature and in our advertisements and places like that. And as we started working on it, we've learned that that's not the case in our community. People aren't, because we're a small community, people don't want to be the face of the coalition or the face of this campaign, because they don't want to be associated in whichever way, whether it's because they don't want to have people come up to them and say, oh, you're the expert, let me ask you what's happening with prescription drug misuse, or just the association of, I don't want my face on a billboard as I drive down the highway and everybody in town sees me. So we're learning that that is a cultural issue in our community, that people, even if they're behind the campaign, they don't necessarily want their face splashed all over the county because it is a small community. So those are a couple of the things that we found as we're looking at cultural competence throughout our campaign. I think the implementation piece required a lot of cultural competence because we want people to relate to our campaign. We want them to understand that it is about really just opening up and talking to your youth, whether you're a grandparent who's raising children, whether you're a parent, biological parent, whether you're an aunt and uncle, a cousin, a coach, whomever. So we wanted to really fully represent what the word meant from parent perspective. It's very easy to get narrowed in, and so we wanted to make sure that we're looking at all aspects of our community and reflecting that well throughout the campaign. Our coalition will definitely be prioritizing the data collection piece. We found prior to this initiative, we really weren't collecting any data about the youth in our community on a consistent basis. Maybe occasionally here and there if a grant came up or something that required that data collection. But overall, we really weren't collecting the data that we needed to be able to see what's happening with the youth in our county. So this new, so the data collection piece will continue through the OES survey. We'll also be prioritizing just having the coalition to continue, and that collaborative piece that's come together as part of this initiative. We were able to pull in people that hadn't been part of any initiative in our county prior to utilizing this SPF process and the Drug-Free Coalition. So really that piece and the learning that we've had along the way and the education that people have had will carry over into many other initiatives throughout the county. I think the most important lesson we learned in engaging in the SPF was that you need to slow down. We tend to always want to be doers. Let's go forward, let's work on something. But really slowing down and looking at the process and making sure what you're doing is going to be effective. Because we can do anything, but it's not always effective. So the SPF process allows us to really look at each piece and say, is what we're doing and are the initiatives we're implementing really going to make a difference in our community? And that is the value of working with the SPF. Some tips I wish I would have known when I first started working with the SPF is that it seems very complicated in the beginning and can be somewhat overwhelming when you start to look at a really data-driven process that has a lot of pieces and parts. But as you work through it, it really becomes intuitive. It flows together, the pieces and parts make sense. And in hindsight, as you look back on the work that you've done, you're like, oh, now I see how the parts and pieces all fit together. The other part is to not be afraid to reach out for help. Sometimes I think we feel very like, I got to do this, I got to figure it out. But it's okay to ask people, especially somebody that's already been through the process, who can help you walk through it. And I think those were probably two of the most valuable things that I would share.